Today on Campaign Check, we're looking at the NHS and claims like this one.
The content of those documents tells us that the NHS is on the table in future trade talks. It tells us that there are, huge interest looking at all different aspects of our NHS, and it cannot be right that we don't take these documents very, very seriously.
So is the NHS really on the table in Britain's trade talks with America? Laura Pidcock there talking about leaked papers from initial trade discussions, but is there a smoking gun in there? Well, there's more than 400 pages of this stuff. You can see Jeremy Corbyn there with it. But when he goes through it, the short answer is no, not really. The NHS doesn't seem to be on the table at all. There's no discussion about hospitals being sold off or ending up in American hands. But there is some evidence for the documents about American negotiators pushing to change terms on pharmaceuticals, in part due to what they describe as angst among American consumers. They say they're paying too much for drugs. So there's a section, for instance, that says the Americans pushed hard on changing the terms of patents, aiming to extend them, which could mean the UK spending more on branded rather than cheaper generic drugs. And that's an issue because, as this chart shows you, Britain is far more reliant on generic drugs, that's those are the cheap ones whose patents have expired, than almost any other country in the developed world. Let me give you an example of why that matters. Last year, the patent on a drug called Humira, it's used to treat a number of conditions, including rheumatoid arthritis. It expired, and NHS boss Simon Stevens, he said that that's going to save £300 million a year. Another example, he said, of how the smarter approach in the UK and Europe gives patients a much better deal than they get in the United States. So any attempt to change patent rules could have an impact. And Labour say that this American push on pharmaceuticals means drugs in this country could get far more expensive. Why? Because if you take a closer look at this chart, you can see that Americans spend more than 2.5 times what Britons spend on pharmaceuticals. Labour says that means drugs here could get 2.5 times more expensive, which equates to £500 million a week. But I'd be a bit cautious about that number. Aside from anything else, one of the reasons Americans spend more on drugs is that they take more, and they've got more prescriptions over there. And finally, it's worth saying, this wouldn't be the first time Americans have pushed hard on pharmaceuticals in a trade deal. They also try to do so in deals with South Korea and Australia as well, but those countries push back with quite a lot of success. This is a deeply complicated area. The trade talks haven't even started yet. The NHS doesn't seem to be on the table. Pharmaceutical pricing might be, but whether that has a knock-on consequence for what we all pay remains to be seen.